All right, we're back in session. Here with IT and 911.
Yes, Adam McKinney, Chief Technical Officer, thank you.
Thank you. So the first part of this is we're talking about the budget just a little bit, and and we're not going into depth about your budget. Just to tell you kind of our goals for this coming year, so that as you got a couple months here before we have our official meetings about budgets and stuff, just to tell you the direction that we'd like to go as a department head and what the commissioner's goals and direction is.
Okay.
First thing is we'd like to keep our budget flat
Okay.
to last year's. When it comes to personnel and stuff like that, we'd like your input of what your goals are. Well, part of this will go into the next meeting too. John, go ahead. You had something to say, I seen it.
I can say something.
Okay.
So, well, one of the things, a couple of things we're looking at is we want to ensure that there's some succession planning for any critical role in the department. That would include yourself and anyone you deem to be a critical position, that if you lost that person, it would be a severe problem. So we want to make sure there are plans in place. If something happened to you, who would step up and take over? We need to have that for every department, and also any other critical individuals. And then secondly, we want every department to take a look at the processes that they're involved with and see if they can't find efficiencies that, should someone leave, for example, you might be able to not replace that person, but maybe divide the duties up in a different way, or use technology to make things more productive without having to replace a head count, or any other efficiencies you might be able to find within the department.
Okay.
Comment, Jeff?
No, we're tracking on that, so.
Okay. Go ahead and share with us what you felt like you wanted to talk about with your budget.
Yeah, I actually thought that we should have worked this up. So I actually have worked up my entire budgets here for both departments. And I was prep to prep. So I'll start with the 911 budget, because that budget I didn't increase or decrease by any amount. It basically, the only, we were able to find a bit of savings in that budget by paring a few line items back to what we've actually used. We were actually able to, this year we were able to use some money that we had grant funding for to replace some systems. So the money that we had allocated for those systems went to a few additional things that we were unrealized when we had started some of these projects. Some of these projects, once they get underway, you have to have some additional power, or you have to have some additional networking or things like that. So by taking most of that stuff out, because we don't anticipate having that stuff next year, we were able to rearrange the 911 budget, and the only amount it changed by was about $3,000. So it's pretty flat. That doesn't, the 911 budget does not include any personnel whatsoever. It's all just equipment, basically. And in addition, I do have one capital ask in the 911 budget that, if we're removed from this budget, would actually be a net decrease of almost $25,000 total on that. I did ask for a capital outlay, and I'll get to why here in a second. Well, actually, I'll just tell you right now. As we're bringing on these additional counties and we're doing networking, we've realized that this networking gear that we have that runs our 911 ring is old. It's simply out of date, much like our other technology. So this year we used the additional money that we had left over to purchase the fiber ring routers, and we're going to replace those all. I did include a capital outlay in this one of $28,000, which would replace the switching gear at all the PSAPs as well. That would bring us all up to current technology with support from Cisco on it. Currently we don't have anything that's not supported. We have spare gear for that, and we have the knowledge to get it going if it breaks. But I'd like to go back to having a fully redundant system for this stuff for 911. So for 911, it's pretty straightforward. There's really almost no increase except for that little bit of capital outlay on that. All right.
So on that, on
yeah.
the 911, we'd had the fire chief come and ask for things that we didn't feel like was part of our system.
Yes.
Have you heard anything more about that?
So that fire alerter system is an interesting one. It predates 911 by almost 20 years. That was put in by the city to alert their fire departments. The current fire chief feels that 911 should help to pay for that system. But 911, I told him flat out, I don't have the budget for it at the moment. We have 3 more lease payments on the PPD console dispatch upgrade, which was the large project. Gordy ran these projects where he would do one large project at a time, basically. And the PPD console upgrade, I told Chief O'Hearn, if you want 911 to fund this, the only way it's gonna happen is after we finish paying for this console upgrade. Well, that's 3+ years out. And then we would probably have to do it with a similar system that we did with this one, put it on a 0% lease, make a large payment year over year. He's not certain that that is fast enough timeline for him. I referred him to Wes and worked with Wes to say, could we find some Homeland Security grant money or some IOEM grant money or something to that effect? But yeah, 911 does not have the budget to shoulder the cost of that replacement system. And I understand why he thinks it should, but at the same time, I think a more collaborative effort for that project is needed. I think the city needs to put a little in. I think we may find some grant money for it. And if I didn't already have ideas of what I want to ask the IPSCC for, I think they could ask the IPSCC for some grant money as well. But yeah, that's a system that currently 911, I'm willing to help him figure out how we're going to pay for it. But 911 is not going to pay for it currently.
Okay,
So
yeah,
it's a big ask. I think it's like 620,000 or like 1.2 if they do every. I also think if the idea that we've discussed with the fire protection district materializes, that might also open us up to some federal monies we might be able to bring in for this. I know Wes was talking about working with the Southeastern Idaho Community of Governments as well to look at funding opportunities for this. So I don't think it's out of the realm of doable, but it's not for the 911.
but that system is for Pocatello only.
Right. Yeah, it's
I mean,
the fire order system.
It's their,
Yeah.
it's their fire department, it's their system.
Yeah, and it does definitely by a long shot predate 911. From after we went and looked at what the system, how it was set up and designed, I mean, it's been in place a long time, and it really should be replaced in the long run. So the upside is the upgrades we've just about finished at PPD will enable whatever system we get to plug and play with that pretty substantially easily. I mean, it doesn't decrease the price, but it's compatible and works with it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, now the IT budget, on the other hand, this one I do have a little bit of increases in, not salary-wise though. I completely agree we need to keep this one flat with the salary because last year's COLA was pretty substantial, it was pretty well done. But this budget this year plans for and absorbs some line items from other departments' budgets. The biggest is that the IT budget this year will cover the entire phone system maintenance. Now, the phone system maintenance quote I have in here, we've got a contract with them, it is not increasing, but I'm taking the portion that the sheriff paid for their piece last year, and I've included that in my budget for this year, so they don't have to. In addition, the fiber ring maintenance, we used to divide that up, juvie paid a portion and probation paid a portion. We've taken that all in as well, so that only one department's paying for that. And then last but not least is the new phone system conversion. We're just about ready to turn over the SIP trunks, so we'll be moving from currently the billing is based on utilization on the phone system. The new billing will be the same every single month. It's like $2,100 a month, and my department plans to pay for that completely as well. So these departments will no longer get billed back for phone system or for long distance service. So they'll be able to cut those. I think most departments put $2,000 a year in there. It's a substantial savings paying for it all out of one budget. So my budget did increase by those amounts, but it decreased by a bunch too.
Okay, so you said it's a substantial savings by paying it out of one budget. Why? I mean,
Well,
to me, it would have been, it's still coming out of the county budget,
correct.
so
The way that it's a substantial savings is, number one, the price on the phone lines themselves decreased by almost 80%. When
Okay.
we moved from the PRI, which is the old copper style, to the new fiber-based system, that cost decreases by a large amount. Now, the long distance didn't decrease by nearly as much, but instead of paying for long distance service by the minute, we're buying a package, a chunk of long distance. So we're saving money there as well. Overall, we had originally targeted, we looked at this and we thought it was going to be 60 to 80% reduction overall on phone bill. It's not. It's closer to 40. But it is, that's still a pretty hefty chunk of money. And it's going to be the same bill every month, basically. No longer will we have to. We also eliminate the software that we currently have that calculates and keeps track of all these departments' utilization to bill them back. We're going to eliminate that as well. So there's another maintenance of software that will no longer.
So in the
be
commissioner's report, we'll have one line instead of 25?
Yeah, yeah. There's just going to be phone service, and that's it. It's just going to be phone service. That's it.
Let me ask you a question on that. Have you calculated the actual and total amount of savings that are going to be obtained through all of this?
So based on what we're currently paying, the budget we have is about $3,300 a month, all departments total up. We're going to pay $2,100 a month total with this new system.
Okay.
So it's not quite half, but it's getting close. The biggest savings is on those phone systems. Originally, the phone service company that we used had stated that you've got to stick with these copper-based trunks. They're the only way to go. You don't want to go to the new stuff. But after quite a bit of research, it's not the case. We just went and said to the city, you guys are using SIP trunks with the same existing hardware. How are you doing it? Oh, well, Lumen has this managed router. They just turn the fiber into copper before we plug it into the phone system. The phone system knows no different. So we went back to BPS. We got working with one of their engineers, and he said, yeah, we can set this up. It's in place. It's tested. It takes a little while to port those numbers and roll it over. The first operation that rolls over will be that new Safety Center. So, but then also decreased a few line items in here by a good amount. First and foremost, I've given court security. There was a line item in this budget for court security maintenance that we almost never used for that purpose. Gordy used to put $5,000 a year in it, and it would go to things like extra cameras, buttons, wiring. Last year, in order to decrease the budgets, I cut that in half. We didn't use that half. This year, I'm dropping it completely. I've talked with Ballard about it. I said, look, general maintenance items that my department fixes, buttons and wiring, can come out of the maintenance budget. I think that she should be budgeting for replacements of that gear. I think court security falls under her purview, and we've had those conversations, so that line is gone. Another one is the website. Last year we rebudgeted another $10,000 for the website. It's not even close. It's $2,500 a year, so we've cut a large chunk out of that. Between Emma and myself working on the website and the new hosting that we've gone to, we just don't need $10,000 a year in there for that. So we've decreased that. Now, last but not least, I did ask for a capital outlay in this budget as well as this one for the core switching here and at the sheriff's department. The core switching gear that we currently have here is 18 years old. It was purchased secondhand from BYU, Idaho in the mid-2000s, and we did experience a failure of it at the sheriff's office just 2 weeks ago. I am concerned that we do not have support on any of that gear. It's hardware end of life this year, so Cisco won't support it either. And we have a kind of a plan on replacing. It's not a super huge ask. It's about $52,000. Would do both sites, and it would bring us up concurrent with not only brand new switching gear, but it's modular. Our current switches are one great big device. So if that thing dies, you need 20 different pieces to replace the whole thing. The new idea is modular. It will be a core of 4 devices, and then we can plug and play inexpensive switches into that. So we don't have to buy. The current 6509 that feeds the courthouse is the Swiss Army knife of gear. It does everything. It's awesome. But if it breaks, it's the single point of failure. The new system that we've quoted out and designed would be 2 redundant core switches and routers, and then a fiber switch that would feed all of our surrounding buildings, and then a redundant switch that would feed our data center. And if we would mirror the same thing at the sheriff's office, but instead of 4 devices, the sheriff's office would only get 2, because they just don't have as much stuff. So those are primarily my asks on this, and I did design this all out. It comes out, if we include the capital outlay ask, it is a 7.4% increase, but it's only a 5% increase, or 5% of that 7.4 is taken from other people's budgets by taking the $11,000 from the sheriff and the fiber ring maintenance from the outlying departments and the phone service. So it ends up being only about a 2.5% increase. And again, we could live without that stuff. But it's one of those things I'd like to plan for the eventuality of it. If failure, it's only an inevitable amount of time, so.
So you have savings that would cover some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, overall, one of the things that increased in this budget that we are not in control of is the software cost. Okay, for example, the biggest one is Tyler. Tyler Munis is going up $17,000 this year, and it went up $13,000 last year. And it's one of those things, like, this is a cost. This is an expensive chunk of software. So last year I had a bit of a surplus in software, and then we used it for Munis reporting, and then we used it to upgrade Munis we did Power BI. And so that software, we're going to continue with that software, but then we have to realize that the price of the base package has actually gone up. And Munis is actually one of the, almost every one of our software as a services have increased in price in some way. And not all of them are that much. Munis is the big shocking one. But Esri's gone up by $3,500. Our antivirus software, it's only going up by like $1,500, but that's still an increase. The firewall software, it's about an increase of $2,000. So these guys, a lot of this software throughout COVID didn't increase. And now we're past COVID, and I think these companies realize, well, we didn't increase the last couple of years, so we're gonna this year. So unfortunately, the software item line goes from, I've got 365 in there last year, it goes to 393 this year. And so we had to take other pieces of that budget to be able to cover that software.
What kind of contracts do we have with these? Are these annual contracts, and once you have this stuff, you're just taking what you get, and this automatically increases whenever they feel like it, or what?
No, generally the departments that have engaged with this, they're aware of these increases. I mean, Tyler Munis is not one that my department was, I have ended up with the money to pay for it, but we did not implement it. So the answer to that question is better to come from Christy, because she's the one who notified me, here's the next year's price.
Who holds the contracts for these various software packages?
Should be you guys. You guys sign for them.
And so the contracts are negotiated not by your group, so
No.
you really have nothing to do with this contracting. The contracting.
No, not for Munis per se.
Let me just say
Yeah.
that they weren't negotiated, they were presented.
Yeah, they were presented, I think.
Unsigned,
Yeah.
is what's happened. I mean, that's,
That's what we pay you for.
Well, and some of this software stuff, there's not really room for negotiation per se. Like our Microsoft, for example, that's one that did not increase very much. It's going to go from, I think I had it at 27. So Microsoft licensing is our server licensing for Windows Server and our email licensing, which is our Office 365 Exchange. That one's only increasing by about $800. Now, there's no room to negotiate with those guys per se, because that's just what we want to get from you guys, and this is how much it costs. And I'm not sure with Munis if we have. One thing I've mentioned is that there are pieces of Munis that we have that we're not utilizing, that I think we could possibly save some money on if we utilize them. But those departments that are in charge of that, they don't necessarily, it doesn't meet their needs per se. The one is the timekeeping system. We pay $25,000 a year for Nova Time. In my opinion, Munis has a component that can do timekeeping in it, but it doesn't meet the needs of the auditing department per se. They don't feel it meets the needs. I think that that's where we could recognize some cost savings if we could get that module to meet the needs of them, or simply bite the bullet, make the transition and feel the pain and retrain people or whatever. Then you could eliminate that money. But until we do that and have those kind of conversations with those departments, we're kind of stuck where we're at, so.
So, how do we go about having those conversations? Is that something that you would take the lead on, or we would have to direct people as commissioners to set up some people to evaluate this?
I think the departments that have requested that software would be the leads that we need to talk to look at the contracts and move in that direction. I mean, I wouldn't want to throw that on him, because
Right.
I'm kind of the payer.
he just makes sure that it fits in our system. He doesn't do the
Right.
contracts
The
with
reason
them.
I'm asking the question is he's the one that brought it to our attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what I
That's
say,
why
I
I'm
just
trying to
wouldn't
find
throw it on his
Right.
lap. I think that that's the individual.
I think that's a discussion for auditing and payroll.
Get the, well, and whoever brings whatever software in, that's their responsibility. And GIS may have some, and, you know, that's who they're the ones that know the needs that they have, and so how do we
Yeah.
meet those needs with the right cost?
Yeah, I think that there's possibilities in a couple of spaces to do that with a couple departments. You know, are you utilizing everything that this software can offer, or are we just paying for it because we're getting it year over year? That's one thing that I did eliminate out of this budget, is that we were paying $11,000 a year for email spam filtering. Well, it's included with our Office 365 Exchange subscription. So I've eliminated that, and we're not gonna pay for that again because it's included in the subscription that we currently have. And I don't see why we should duplicate services. So that kind of stuff, I think that you'll find there are a few places that we could do that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it for 911 and IT's budgets. Again, kept them as flat as we could, I think, on salary wise, because I think that.
We have 5 minutes to do your eval.
Okay, let's do it. And I came very prepared. Like I said,
Love it.
I'm ready. My budgets are about done now at this point.
Yours was obviously
Let's
pretty.
go into executive session.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Mr. Chair, make a motion, we enter into executive session under Idaho Code 74-2061, A and B.